What's up?
That's what I was just going to ask. Do you want like a stool or something?
Do I want a stool? I'm alright standing.
Alright, let me turn that on.
Just put this mic on and I'll use this one. Check, 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 check. Check. Has everybody seen Jose? Sing with Jose. For those of you that don't know, Jose has been my drum tech for 20-something years, since the Images and Words tour. But he wasn't here for opening day of Dog Camp. He just got back from being out with Marco Miniman and the Joe Satriani tour. I share him with Marco. I loan him out to Marco. But and that's why we had the pedal breakdowns at the first gig. But Jose, as soon as the pedal broke, it's like, okay, fuck Satriani. We got to fly Jose out. I can't do the closing night show without him. So he's here to help me tonight, make sure we don't break any pedals. And poor Marco Miniman is all on his own. Anyway, welcome to the final day of Dog Camp. I know.
Still no s'mores.
It's been amazing, huh? Next time we gotta do like a month of Dog Camp, right? 4 days is enough for me in the woods. That's it. I'm a city boy. I have definitely reached my threshold. But it's been an amazing experience. Man, like, when I first saw you guys on day one, it was just a bunch of strangers and fans, and now it feels like family, right? I really wish that they actually put the chairs up to the front. Why? Is this like the mosh pit for the master class or something? What the hell is this? Well, anyway, it's been an amazing week. It really has, and I'm absolutely blown away by the level of talent from some of you guys. It's incredible. Me, Billy, and Richie just signed all the diplomas, and I think most of you are graduating. Some of you are getting left back, but I think most of you will graduate. Maybe not you, maybe not you. I'm just kidding. You're all graduating. But it really has been amazing, and it's like, it's crazy, like at some of these Discovery Rooms things, to watch some of you guys play the kit and play some of my drum parts like better than I do. You know, it's like, it's crazy. So it's all about sharing here. It's all about learning from each other. My whole experience at Berkeley was like that. It was about, Berkeley was like this. It was a very similar environment. You know, it's just musicians that just love music and want to learn, and you learn just as much from your fellow student at Berkeley as you do from the teachers. And it's the same thing here at Dog Camp. You learn just as much from the fellow campers as you do from the counselors or watching the shows at night. And I hear you guys all jamming all day, you know, all throughout the day in the jam rooms, and it's just incredible, the level of talent, and I can feel the passion, you know, amongst you guys as musicians. The fact that you're here proves that you love music and you want to be better and you want to learn more, and that's what being a musician is about. It's about constantly learning and constantly growing, and you guys are on the right track, so congratulations and thank you for an amazing week. That's it, see you later. As you can see, Jose brought a drum throne for me. I like that they're called thrones, by the way, because us drummers, you know, we are kings, right? So I guess I'll use it. I mean, that's why I became a drummer after all, because I get to sit the whole time. A lot of people say that they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and that was the moment that they knew they wanted to be a musician. That was the moment I knew I wanted to be a drummer. It's like, okay, that guy's standing, that guy's standing, that guy's standing, that guy's sitting. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to sit for a living. So that's how I decided to be a drummer. And once you know it, I end up standing half the time anyway. So anyway, were any of you guys at my Discovery Rooms the last 2 days? Yeah. Better yet, how many of you weren't at the Discovery Rooms? Okay, good. So there's some new people here that I haven't interacted with. The Discovery Rooms were more about you guys, and you know, the last couple days in the Discovery Rooms, it was about jamming together, playing together, you know, me watching you play and playing with you and interacting. I guess this is going to be a little different. I guess the focus here is going to be more on me and drumming and technique. I haven't done a clinic in 11 years. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, I did hundreds and hundreds of clinics. Any of you older guys ever see me do clinics back then? Only one, so good. It's been a long, I mean, I did so many back in the 90s, and I stopped doing them in 2003. So it's been 11 years since I've done anything that's resembling a clinic or a master class. So this is my first time doing anything of that sort. What I used to do was play along with tracks and things like that. I don't have anything like that prepared today. So what we'll do today is basically open the floor to you guys to have one final Q&A. You know, we had an opening day Q&A, and the discovery rooms were also Q&As. But this is really the last chance to let you guys, you know, pick my brain. And you know, I'd like to keep the focus on drumming and technique, and if you have any questions about anything in my career, we can address it, and I can play things for you and break them down for you. But honestly, you know, for me, drumming and making music is about everything, you know, and I think it's important to learn about everything. And my roles within my bands, especially with Dream Theater, was always about everything anyway. It wasn't always just the drumming. It's about, you know, writing the music, writing the lyrics, writing the melodies, producing the albums, directing the videos, overseeing the merchandise and the websites and the bootlegs and the touring and picking the opening bands and writing the set list. I mean, being in a band is a full-time gig with a million responsibilities. So, that being said, we don't have to only talk drums in here. You know, my roles throughout the years have covered all those things. So, you know, if there's any questions in any departments of any of those things, we could talk about it here over the next hour. So, with that, I'll open up the floor for a couple questions and we'll get things rolling.
When you were in college, did you make any songs for Dream Theater when you were still in college?
Did I make any, did Dream Theater do any writing in college? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, for those of you that don't know the history, I went to Berkeley in 1985, and within the first 2 weeks of school, I met John Petrucci and John Mayung, and the three of us formed a band, which was then called Majesty, and it turned into Dream Theater. And we spent our first year at Berkeley just immersed in music classes, and like I said a couple days ago, I was taking music theory and harmony and ear training and sight singing. And I wanted to learn more. I didn't want to just be a drummer. I wanted to be a well-rounded musician. And I learned about scales and modes and key signatures and, you know, just everything I could. That was the focus of Berkeley, learning all that stuff. But at the same time, me and John were playing together and forming the nucleus of this band. And we started with covers. We started with Rush covers and Maiden covers and things like that. But immediately started writing together. And I would say at Berkeley, the year we were at Berkeley, we wrote around 8 songs, and we recorded our very first demo then. It was a 6-song demo done on my 4-track. I had a little 4-track that my grandmother bought me for my high school graduation, and that was kind of my first venture into recording and engineering and producing, because I was the only one of any of us that had a 4-track. So we did those early Majesty demos on my 4-track, and it was a 6-song demo, and I ended up releasing it many years later through the official bootleg series that I did with Dream Theater. And even if you see the score DVD that we did, which was the Dream Theater 20th anniversary tour, and we filmed it a night at Radio City Music Hall with an orchestra and everything, we actually played at that show a song called Another One, which was the very, very first song that we ever wrote together. So to celebrate the 20th anniversary, we played that first song. But the first Majesty demo is out there, and that was the stuff that we wrote the first year of Dream Theater, and it was basically just the three of us, instrumentally. And then when we went home, we added Kevin Moore on keyboards and Chris Collins, who was our first singer, on vocals, and we added them to the demos, and that was the beginning of Dream Theater.
Just on that, the writing process.
You guys speak real loud because I'm going deaf at my old age.
So when you guys were writing songs in Dream Theater, at the the start. How did that change from when you first got together to later on in the years when, I guess my example is with Images and Words, I knew you guys sat on those songs for about a year before they were released, whereas some of your later albums are recorded in the studio and you were writing within 3 weeks.
Well,
so how did it change over time?
I will say, over the 25 years of Dream Theater, I mean, the process changed. You know, as we got more and more successful, we had more time to work with, and well, actually, it's not true. The first couple albums we had all the time in the world because we were waiting years and years and years to get started. But as time went on, the process changed, and we had more money and more better accommodations. But to be honest, the way of writing and the style of writing never changed. You know, over those 25 years, the way we wrote together was the same for Black Clouds as it was for the Majesty demo. It was us in a room together, jamming on ideas, and I said this in the Discovery Room the other day. Yesterday, we got a whole bunch of guys together to write a song just from jamming, and it's like, that's how I wrote with Dream Theater, and that's how the Winery Dogs write. So the process itself was the same. It was, you know, just playing ideas, talking about them, putting them together, discussing them, changing them, fiddling with them, and always music first. It was always the music first. It always started instrumentally. In fact, the first 3 sets of Dream Theater albums and demos were written instrumentally. The Majesty demo was written instrumentally. Then When Dream and Day Unite was written instrumentally before Charlie was in the band. And then Images and Words was written instrumentally before James was in the band. So we pretty much established right from the beginning, because we were always writing without a singer, pretty much the blueprint of the writing was the 4 instrumentalists, and myself and John Petrucci and Kevin Moore in the early days were always the ones writing the melodies and the lyrics. And that followed through all the way to the end, even towards the end with, you know, Black Clouds and Systematic Chaos. Me and John Petrucci were writing the bulk of the lyrics and the vocal melodies, and we would kind of present them to the singer. Because that's always the way the formula was for us. But I will say, the style was there. If you hear those early Majesty demos, or you hear the first When Dream and Day Unite album, the sound and the style and the blueprint was established right from the beginning, and I don't think we strayed that much. I think we just improved, you know, with time and experience. That's what it's all about. It's all about just doing your best in the beginning and learning from it, and as time goes on, the more you do it, the better you'll get.
Do you remember what your process was for learning to play and sing at the same time?
There was no process for me to play and sing at the same time. I think it was just pure boredom. I think I'm the type that, in case you haven't noticed yet, I'm a complete workaholic and a multitasker. I'm constantly juggling 15 different things at the same time, you know, when I'm not behind the drums. You know, right now I'm currently dealing with Dog Camp. I'm overseeing the Flying Colors release and tour. I'm overseeing the Transatlantic DVD, preparing to do Neil Morse's next album, preparing to do my son's recording next month. So it's a constant, there's just constantly things going. I think the same thing goes for drumming. After a while, it's like, okay, I started as a kid with, okay, this limb and this limb is busy. All right, what can this limb do? All right, let's get this. All right, what about this limb? Then it's like, all right, well, I can chew gum. What about my mouth? What can I do? So I start singing, you know, it's like, there's just like, I just want to do things to keep busy. And as far as the singing goes, it just happened. You know, it's similar to drumming. You know, I'm not trained, and I'm also not trained on drums either. You know, if you look at the way I play drums, maybe I sit wrong, maybe I hold the sticks wrong. I don't know much about technique and rudiments and things like that. I always just sat down and played from the heart and learned from my favorite drummers and albums. And the same thing goes with singing. I mean, I'm not a singer, but I think some of my favorite singers are people that don't necessarily have great voices. I mean, I love Roger Waters. He's not a great singer, but he's expressing himself, you know, and that's what it's about, is expression. Or sometimes, you know, like Peter Criss or Roger Waters. Some of my favorite singing drummers are people like Peter Criss, Roger Taylor, Ringo, you know, Phil Collins, and these guys. Well, Phil Collins has a great voice, but somebody like Ringo or Peter Criss or whatever, they just added a character to a vocal blend, and that's that's what I like to do with Transatlantic or Flying Colors is just add or the Winery Dogs, be a part of that vocal blend and add a personality. To me, personality trumps technique any day of the week in any instrument. Vocally, drumming wise, I will take Keith Moon over Virgil Donati any day of the week, and I love Virgil, and I'm not slamming Virgil. But the point is, to me, my preference is a drummer that, I can relate to, makes me smile, makes me want to play. And the same with a singer, Roger Waters or whatever, they may not have great voices, but they move me. And as far as singing and drumming, I just do what I do. I think I learned a lot about pitch and intervals and things like that, and sight singing and ear training at Berklee. So I get to utilize that. I know about melodies when I write melodies. I know how to create harmonies. I know how to sing a third or a fifth or a seventh. And I'm aware of, I have good relative pitch. So those are things I learned at Berklee and kind of can implement when I'm singing and drumming. Way in the back where you're gonna have to yell because I'm deaf.
What would you say has been your favorite gig you've ever done and why? And to contrast that, say is the worst gig you've ever done and why?
Favorite gig, I always just automatically go back to that Radio City Music Hall show, the score gig that I was just talking about, the 20th anniversary show. That's kind of like my default answer, because it was really one of those nights. It was 20th anniversary. We played with an orchestra. Radio City Music Hall was a place I always dreamed of playing. So that's the one I always fall back on and think of. But there were so many others. Playing Madison Square Garden with Dream Theater in 2010 was a dream come true. Playing the Budokan in Tokyo was amazing. Playing Wembley Arena in London was amazing. A couple months ago on the Progressive Nation cruise, playing with Transatlantic and John Anderson singing, that's definitely one of the career highlights for me. It was one of those magical nights that I'll never ever forget. So those are some of the favorite gig moments. Least favorite gigs? It's weird. It's not always the shithole little clubs. Sometimes the shithole little clubs end up being great, great gigs. And sometimes playing the big mammoth arenas are horrible gigs. So it's not really based on size. It's usually based on some sort of technical failure or something like that. I mean, I played.
Technical failure that ever happened.
The biggest technical failure for me wasn't a technical failure. It was a physical failure. I was playing a gig in Munich, Germany, in '97, and it was the last song of the set. We were playing "Learning to Live," and it was the end vamp. And I just went to play a fill, and I think I just bit off more than I could chew with the fill. Like my stomach was big, my mouth was bigger than my stomach. My hands were bigger than my mind was bigger than my hands. And I went to do this crazy fill, and all of a sudden I felt like a cramp in my right arm, and it felt like I pulled a muscle or something. And I looked over, and my wrist was snapped completely backwards, with the palm facing up. Yeah, and it was like, I just felt like I turned blue and just like immediately froze and panicked. Song kept going. So I had to continue playing, but I started yelling back to my tech. Jose wasn't with me for that gig. I had a fill-in tech, and I panicked, and he immediately started snapping my hand back into place, and immediately stuffed my hand into a bucket of ice to finish the song. We finished the show, and the crowd was great, so I needed to play the encore. I couldn't just stop. So we did Metropolis for the encore, and I did it one-handed, so it was like the Rick Allen version of Metropolis. And then I immediately went to the hospital, and they had to snap, I had dislocated my wrist, and they had to snap it back into place. I had to do the rest of the tour with a brace on and take it easy, and ever since then, I've had to warm up every day before I play. Sometimes I'll do it for a half hour, sometimes it's even just 5 minutes, but you gotta get that blood flowing, get the muscles going. I try to get massaged as often as I can, go to the chiropractor as much as I can. Drumming is an incredibly physical instrument. It's not like we're just standing there playing keyboards. I mean, we're hitting shit, you know? So it's a very physical thing, and you gotta be careful. You gotta pace yourself, make sure you're warmed up. So that's one particular gig that comes to mind as, that was a rough one.
Like when you say warm up, what do you do?
Louder.
When you say warm up, what do you do to warm up? Like, are you lifting like light weights or
He's
is
just
it
bring rock
playing?
juice.
Right. Well, that's what I do. My routine before any gig for usually 5 to 30 minutes, depending on how much time I have, is to just sit backstage with my sticks. I have a pair of warm-up sticks that have weighted tips on them. So if I don't have a practice pad or whatever, I can literally play on a table or a chair or whatever and get some bounce back. And basically, like I said before, I'm not like, I didn't go to you know, marching band, you know, drum corps or anything like that, so I don't know a lot of rudiments. So I'll just warm up doing double strokes, just to get the blood going, maybe some patterns. Nothing specific, it's not a specific, you know, routine or anything, just to get the blood going, get the feet going as well. Anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. Just do some stretches, you know, do all that, warm up. Slam a rock juice, which is whatever energy drink is in the fridge that night. Take a piss, huddle with the band, and hit the stage, and that's the warm up. But taking that last minute piss is very, very important. Especially if you're playing a gig with like Transatlantic and you're playing like a 3-hour show. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One is, what do you do for blisters?
The blisters. I don't get them often. I usually get them at the start of a tour when I haven't been playing for a while. But to be honest, it's not often that I haven't been playing for a while. My schedule's so busy that I'm usually jumping from tour to tour to tour, or you know, session or doing a recording session. So my blisters are usually, they stay, they're pretty intact. But what do I do for them? Occasionally at the start of a tour, I'll get really bad ones and maybe have to put some like Band-Aids or some tape on me. But you know, that's a sign of, that's a good sign. If you're getting blisters and things like that, and that means that your hands are getting a workout, and it's good. Give your hands a workout, but basically, there's no trick. I'll put like body lotion on them, you know, at night before I go to bed. Sometimes they get really, I've also found them, you know, as the years have gone on, my hands get very dry. That's why I have to wrap my sticks now. Never used to be like that. When I was younger, I always played without wraps or anything like that. And now I can't. If I was to pick up an unwrapped stick right now, it would be very, very uncomfortable for me. And for a while, I was just using a spray bottle to spray my hands and keep my hands kind of moist. But now I actually wrap them. Well, I don't wrap them. And that helps me, and it also helps with you know, keeping the blisters away and things like that. And as I mentioned in the discovery room, I play with the left stick with the butt end out and the right stick with the tip out. The reason for that is so I can get power on the snare with the butt end, but I can get definition on the ride and the hi-hat with the tip out. And I've been playing like that for over 20 years now, and you know, it makes life difficult for Jose because he's got to wrap half the sticks lefty and half the sticks righty, and then if I throw a stick and drop a stick, I got to make sure I'm picking up a lefty or a righty, so it's, you know, just a whole other thing to keep in mind. But yeah, there you go.
And also, what is the story with the live scenes from the Euro covers?
What is he saying? The story with?
The story with the live scenes from the Euro cover.
The cover?
Yeah.
You mean with the Twin Towers and everything?
Yeah, so like, what?
Hi.
So when they banned
You want to know if I'm part of the Al Qaeda, don't you? You were sent here by the FBI and the CIA. You're on to me. I mean, it was the craziest coincidence in the history of music. We put out a live album. The release date was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. You know, all albums in America come out on Tuesdays, and our release date for our live album was September 11th. And the album cover was, instead of a flaming heart, which was like a Dream Theater symbol, we had a flaming Big Apple with the New York Skyline, with the New York skyline inside the Big Apple in flames, because it was a live album recorded in New York. So the album was called Live Scenes from New York. The Big Apple and the Twin Towers in flames. That hit the shelves September 11th, 2001. It was the most bizarre thing ever, and it's the only time that Rolling Stone ever gave a shit on who Dream Theater was. It's the only coverage we ever got in Rolling Stone magazine. But yeah, it was just one of those crazy, crazy coincidences, and obviously we yanked them off the shelf immediately and had to change the cover because it was just such a horrible coincidence, and just a coincidence. But yeah, it's insane.
You should see how much biscuits are worth.
I have a giant box of them still in my closet at home.
Send me one.
Send you one?
In terms of the gear you use, did you ever approach your companies for endorsement? How did you get endorsed by the drum and cymbal companies?
Say that once more.
How did you
Get your endorsements?
Endorsements.
Did you ever approach the companies, or did they come to you?
Well, let's see. Let's look at the timeline. I started getting endorsements around '93, once Dream Theater started getting some recognition and some success. So that is the horrible, unfortunate moral to the story, is that usually endorsement companies don't care about you until you have some success and something that you can offer them. That's the unfortunate reality of it. It's so backwards because realistically it's kids that need the support and help of the, but it's the reality. So to take it back a few steps, when I was a kid, I first wanted to play Tama drums because all my favorite drummers played Tama. So around 1982, 83, when I was looking to buy my first drum set, my favorite drummers were Neil Peart, who was a Tama drummer at the time, Stuart Copeland, Bill Bruford, Simon Phillips. Did I say Stuart Copeland? But anyway, those guys were all Tama drummers, so I wanted to be a Tama drummer, and I worked 3 jobs one summer to save up all my money and buy a Tama kit. And that was the Black Imperial Star kit, which I used all the way through Images and Words. You know, the first Dream Theater album, the second Dream Theater album, and you know, once I started working with Dream Theater and we did our first and second album, I went to Tama and said, look, I love your drums, I want to be your endorser. And Dream Theater was still an unknown band and they didn't really care yet. They didn't, they kind of didn't give me the time of day. But then we started getting a buzz, and then all of a sudden Sabian contacted me, and they were the first company to come to me. And there was a couple people there that noticed me and were really interested in what I was doing and the impact I was making on the drum scene at the time. And I was playing Zildjian at the time, but Sabian is the same family, for those of you that don't know. Basically, it's the 2 Zildjian brothers, you know. There's Zildjian cymbals and then the Sabian cymbals, but they both come from the Zildjian family. So Sabian came to me and they wanted me on board, and they sent me a whole stack of cymbals, and we threw them up on the kit, and Jose was with me then, and we tried them out, and I loved him. But more than loving the cymbals, because there's a million great drum companies, and a million great stick companies, and a million great cymbal companies, one of the most important things for me for that endorsement was their support and enthusiasm. That to me spoke volumes. It's like they recognized me, they approached me, they're a great company that's going to get behind me and support me, and that to me was almost more important than the product itself. The product speaks for itself. It's great, you know, but the fact that there was a company that believed in me and wanted to get behind me, and I've been with them ever since. So then it started happening with all the other companies. Remo started coming to me, Latin Percussion started to come to me, and Napex Drums came to me. And they had just redesigned their line, and they were signing all these people. They had signed Terry Bozzio, they signed Matt Sorum, who was in Guns N' Roses at the time, they signed Terry Bozzio, and they wanted to bring me on board. And I went with them, because Tama wasn't doing anything for me. And I spent about 1.5 years with Mapex. I did the Awake album and the Change of Seasons album with my Mapex kit. But now this is where the support comes in hand. I was doing a lot of clinics at that time, and I was getting hired to do clinics all around the world, and Mapex's distribution was not really up to par at that point. So I would end up doing these clinics And Mapex couldn't supply the kit, so I do a clinic on a Yamaha kit or a DW kit or a Gretsch kit. And after a while, it's like, why am I endorsing a product that I can't like play everywhere I go? And then Tama at that point started knocking at my door like, hey, they came crawling back and with their tail between their legs, and they were like, look, we really, really want you. We really want you. You know, what can we do to make this right? And I went back to Tama because that's where I always wanted to be. It was always my favorite drum. It was always my drum of choice. So basically, I've been playing Tama since 2000, since '83. So we're talking, you know, what is that, 30-something years at this point. And with the exception of those couple of years there, you know, I've been loyal to them. I even have the Tama logo tattooed on me and the Sabian logo tattooed on me. I'm not one of those drummers that goes from company to company to company. To me, it's about that relationship and that loyalty and that commitment. And since coming back to Tama, and since being with Sabian, I mean, I'm like the top dog for both companies, and they just treat me with such love and attention that I couldn't ask for a better relationship. And you know, we've since then developed my own signature snares, and my own signature cymbals, my own signature sticks with Promark, my own, you know, heads, custom heads with Remo. So that's the kind of relationship you want with an endorsement company. How's that for a long answer? I'm the king of long answers, right? But that's the endorsement story. And the moral to it, though, and maybe the answer to your real question is, I think you need a name in order for them to really, you know, for it to be a mutually beneficial situation.
What's your approaching or composing? For example, if I have a riff, do you do notation of the rhythm of the riff, or you just learn the melody and start to play around?
Can somebody say that? Tell me what he said.
The writing process from a riff.
For the drum parts?
Do you write them out, or?
I would say there's 3 different ways that my drum parts come about. The first would be the times that they stem from the drums. You know, most of the writing scenarios that I'm in are more collaborative situations. Dream Theater was always a collaborative writing process, and the drums played a huge part in the direction of the music. And you know, I would write a pattern or a beat or a groove or you know, a bunch of time signature patterns or whatever, and we would write around that. It's this, you know, Winery Dogs is a collaborative writing process. Transatlantic is very collaborative. Flying Colors is collaborative. So that's the first case where my drums are part of the writing process and sometimes dictate the way. The second way is when the drums are just a part of the collaboration, but just playing a supportive role. You know, maybe there's a riff or an idea or a progression or a song maybe that even exists where my part is basically just being a supportive backbeat for the song, and it's not supposed to take the front and center role. And I'm supposed to serve the song rather than serve the song serving the drum part. And then the third case is when I'm kind of like a hired gun and I'm already presented something, which is like when I did the Avenged Sevenfold album, when I got the demos of the Rev's drum parts, and I was kind of, my purpose there was to bring his drum parts to life. Or when I did the Neil Morse solo albums, usually Neil is sending me demos of songs that are pretty much complete, and he'll have drum machine patterns on there. I'll learn the patterns, I'll learn the songs, but of course I'll implement my own style and my own embellishments with the fills and some of the nuances. So that's it. I mean, there's no one way. You know, I'm fortunate to work in so many different musical situations now, where each one of them, I get to wear different hats. You know, with Dream Theater, I wore like the leader hat and oversaw everything, and everything went through me. You know, my situation with the Winery Dogs or with Transatlantic or with Flying Colors is more of a team player. You know, we all make decisions together, we all delegate certain departments for certain people. And then like I said, I have the hired gun hat that I'll, you know, with Avenged or with Neil Morse or like, you know, the Big Elf album I played on, where I'm kind of just the drummer. And I'm very comfortable with all these different positions and roles with all these different bands. I get to, you know, play differently and act differently. Sometimes I'll like be in a situation, it's like, okay, which one of me do you want? Do you want my input? You want me to be a leader? You want me to be a team player? What do you want? And you have to kind of go with the flow for the different situations.
Mike, you have a lot of different genres that that you're involved in, different projects and stuff like that. But it always comes back to your signature. You have the signature style, signature fills. Could you break down some of those like signature fills that you use on all your recordings that make you you?
So, well, you're right. That's one of the beautiful things I'm loving about my current career is that I have so many different things, and they all give me different kind of outlets. Transatlantic is traditional prog. Winery Dogs is classic rock power trio. Flying Colors is more like Radiohead meets Muse, Coldplay, alternative pop. Big Elf is Beatles, psychedelic, And in all these cases, Adrenaline Mob was more metal, hard rock. In all these cases, I need to serve the style and I need to serve the band first and foremost. And I never want to overplay if that's not what's called for. I want to always serve the band, serve the song, serve the style. So in all these cases, I'm kind of playing a different style. But that being said, I think it's also important to have an identity. I don't ever want to sound like a drum machine. I want it to always sound like Mike Portnoy, whether I'm playing with Avenged Sevenfold or if I'm playing with Neil Morris, which are worlds apart, but yet you can hear it's me. So I guess maybe the key to that are some of these signature fills and things like that. The most basic signature thing for me that has always been part of my arsenal are the fills that are like the doubles and quadruples on tops and bottoms. So for those of you that have never seen me do a clinic or never seen any of my drum videos, I guess I'll break that down to its most simplest form, which are basically patterns that are just like I would say, half of the fills I do are patterns like that. And basically, I always lead with the right hand and with the right foot. So in all these cases, if it was a 2 on top, 2 on bottom, it would be right, left, right, left. So that's like 2 and 2, then you have 4 and 2. Or you can mix it up, 2s and 4s. So that's just Mike Portnoy Fill 101. And you could hear that stuff in everything from Adrenaline Mob to Flying Colors. And once again, stylistically worlds apart, but I always want to bring my style to whatever I do. I guess another thing, and we broke this down in the discovery room yesterday, is the use of stacks and patterns like that as well. Like this kit's hard. Usually with my other setups, I have the stacks up front, which is easier to do that. This kit, with the Winery Dogs, I do less of that, but more. That's another thing too, is the 5s and the 7s was a huge part of the things I used to do in Dream Theater. A lot of the patterns were written around and so much of my Dream Theater style was based around numbers and 3s and 2s. I mean, a 5 pattern is just a 3 and a 2. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, or a 7 pattern is just 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1. I mean, every pattern is a 2 or a 3 and a combination of that. So putting them together, trying different combinations, triplets, or just 2s. So, I mean, that's another part of my style. That's a big part of everything I do. I still use a lot of that with Transatlantic and the more progressive things I do.
placement, and you play different configurations and stuff, the placement of the cymbals that's pretty important on a lot of what you play, basically.
Well, there's the drum setup and then there's the cymbal setup. The drum setups can be huge to small. This is the smallest drum setup that I play, with any of my bands. But as you can see, it's still a big cymbal setup. With Dream Theater, it was massive drum setup because that was what was called for that music. Avenged Sevenfold and Adrenaline Mob was a big setup because it was a more hard rock metal thing. Transatlantic Flying Colors, Neil Morris is a more medium setup, and then here with the Winery Dogs, it's a small setup. So every time I'm starting with a new band or a new project, I'm like, what kind of kit is appropriate? The drums usually kind of go from small to huge, but the cymbals are pretty constant. So no matter what setup I'm working with, usually the cymbals, you're going to find a hi-hat, a ride, 2 to 3 crashes, a couple of splashes, a couple of stacks, and a china. So that's like the basic arsenal, no matter whether it's a small kit like this or a massive kit. Sometimes I'll add extra things like a chopper or a bell, and like I said in one of the discovery rooms the other day, I'm not picky, believe it or not. With Dream Theater, it's like, this was my setup, it's an AAX and it's an HH, but now that I'm doing all these different bands, and sometimes Sabian has to send me stuff, it's like, look, I don't care if it's an HHX or an AA, I'm an equal opportunity employer. Send me anything and I'll hit it. As long as the crashes are here, and the hi-hat is here and the ride is there. I'm into experimenting with different sounds and different cymbals and things like that. But as far as the placement, usually on the massive kits and the medium kits, the placements are pretty similar, and I usually do have the stacks and the splashes out front, and always low, because I'm just a ham and I want to be seen. I don't want to be buried by the cymbals, like Nico McBrain. I want everyone to see me.
Makes it easier because
and it's easier to access when they're in front. And I always have the crashes here, the chinas, and they kind of almost like a mirror image reaching back. When I did PSMS, which is me, Billy, and Derek Shermany and Tony McAlpine, I put the chinas in front for that because it was just I hadn't had that in any of my recent setups, and that was a lot of fun for a lot of those kind of patterns. With this setup, with the Winery Dogs setup, it's old school. This is your old school setup. You don't want to clutter it up with crap up here in the front. This is it. Bonham setup, which is crash, 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 ride. Maybe a china, maybe a splash, and then my stick launcher over here, which is purely. This cymbal's either purely for launching sticks or for beating the shit out of stuff with. So that's the general placement. But I like experimenting. Every time I do a new project, it's kind of like it gives me a fresh palette to work with. You guys scream.
When you were at Portnoy, all the stuff you learned, did you find that helpful for your drumming, basically, on music?
Well, like I said before, my time at Berkeley, I talked about this yesterday, for those of you who weren't there, then I'll repeat it, but my time at Berkeley was mainly focused on the other stuff, not drumming. I think by the time I got to Berkeley, I was very similar to the drummer I am today. I had the chops and the drumming knowledge and background already from years and years of developing and listening to other drummers and learning. By the time I went to Berkeley, I wanted to learn all that other stuff. I wanted to be more than a drummer. I wanted to learn how to communicate with other musicians. So I took music theory and ear training and harmony and arranging and all sight singing, all that stuff, to learn about modes and scales and key signatures and be able to communicate with other musicians. And that's the stuff that I use every day since then in writing and communicating. I can hear, if Richie's playing in A and you want to go down a minor third or whatever, okay, go to F sharp or whatever, then let's modulate, for the last chorus, let's go up a whole step. I know that kind of stuff. I can communicate that way with the other guys. That's from learning all that stuff at Berkeley. And like I said earlier, also, it was also the other musicians at Berkeley that I learned so much from. Jamming together and watching them play, just the same way you guys have had all week here at the camp. But you know, that's not to say I didn't continue learning as a drummer as well. But I think my time, if I stayed at Berkeley, I probably would have gotten deeper and deeper into the drumming stuff. But my first year there was mainly the other stuff, and then I was only there that first year. But if any of you, I mean, if you're here, you're obviously serious about learning. So, you know, I would highly recommend an experience like Berkeley to any of you if you're considering it. I mean, it's like what you've had for the past 4 days, but for 4 years. You know, it's intense. It's really great. Way in the back.
You're talking about Avenged Sevenfold and the Nightmare recording. What is you and what was the rest?
Well, basically with the Avenged Sevenfold, those guys contacted me 2 weeks after the Rev's funeral. So it was all a very, very fresh, emotional experience. And they were, I believe, weeks away from getting ready to start the album with the Rev. I mean, I think they already had the studio time and they were ready to start the album when he passed away. So basically those guys gave me all the demos, which had the Rev on an electronic drum machine. Basically, they were demoing the songs on Pro Tools with Jimmy playing like pads. And it was just basic beats and patterns. And a lot of the demos had the Rev singing. I have Natural Born Killers and Buried Alive and some of those songs with the Rev doing the vocal melodies and guidelines for Matt to learn and write to. But most of the beats were there. So when I was hired to do the album, I knew I was there to bring his drum parts to life because he wasn't alive to do it anymore. And it was an honor to be asked to do that. You know, they asked me to do it because I was one of his favorite drummers. And it was just, the whole thing was an honor, but I wanted to honor that. I wasn't gonna walk in there and put my stamp on stuff. You know, my job there was to honor him and finish the work that he started. So I did my best to follow all the patterns as much as I could, and then spice them up. So a lot of the spices weren't on the demos because it was a drum machine. So a lot of times it would just be, yeah, you know, that's there. You know, the chorus for Nightmare would be. So the beats were there, but then I would spice it up, like the bell thing was, I added that. So, I mean, you know, I could sit here and go A versus B and show you what was mine and what was Jimmy's. But, I mean, the basic answer is the beats and the patterns were his, the spices and the embellishments and a lot of the fills were mine. Like, what's the last song? Save Me in the album. There's a lot of crazy drum fills. Those weren't on the demo, so that was mine. But whenever I could honor what he had, I did and left it.
Just on your career as a producer, so what made you want to start producing the Dream Theater albums? Did you not like what the previous producers were doing, like on the Awake and Falling into Infinity? And
Yeah.
what did you learn from those guys, and what did you do differently, I suppose?
I think my wanting to produce the Dream Theater albums with John was more a result of just, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Like, just being a control freak. The early Dream Theater albums, we didn't have much leverage. You know, the label wanted us to work with producers to help shape the music, which I think is a huge mistake for a band like Dream Theater because it's a very unique sound and style. It shouldn't be shaped by a third party. So I had an objection to that. The producers were brought in to make the record sound a certain way. For instance, I hated the drum triggers on Images and Words. Kevin Shirley came in, you know, and chopped up all those songs for Falling into Infinity, and Desmond Child came in and rewrote. So for me, all my experiences with producers were miserable experiences. It was like basically giving up creative control, and I'm a control freak. You know, I don't, you know, even with Dream Theater, we would spend days or weeks or months arguing amongst ourselves if the third note in the 47th bar should be an A or an A flat. You know, we would spend days arguing over that, and then a producer would just come in there and just chop it out. It made me insane, but we had no leverage. You know, if a record company is going to give you $500,000 to make a record, they want to make sure you're not going to go spend it on drugs or you know, they don't know. They want to make sure that there's somebody in there to babysit you and get the record that they want. And finally, it came to a point after the Falling Into Infinity experience, which almost broke up the band. I wanted to quit the band. I had had enough. The loss of control was just maddening to me. I was ready to leave the band. I talked to the guys. I said, look, if we're going to do this, we gotta change everything about this the way this band is run. And that meant we got to regain control over our music, get rid of the label's input. We need to self-produce. Me and John were pretty much always running the show, making the creative decisions. And it's like, look, we're going to partner up. We're going to run the show. We're going to produce the albums. And we went to the label and said, look, we're going to produce our own albums. You're not going to hear the material till it's done. Or you don't have a Dream Theater. We're done. So take your pick. And they said, okay, we'll give you a shot. We'll give it a chance. And then at that point, we brought Jordan into the band, and we wrote Scenes from a Memory. And we proved ourselves with that album. We proved ourselves to the fans, to the label, and we basically at that point established that John and I are capable of producing our own music, and I'm capable of making a lot of decisions in the band. And you know, that was another thing. It's like we have to stop bickering and fighting over this fake democracy, basically. You know, we had to come up with a way that worked within the band, and we proved ourselves with that album, and at that point, we're able to start producing our own albums. Now, what that means for me is a producer to the capacity that I would bring to Dream Theater, or any other bands, but mainly with Dream Theater, is overseeing the whole creative process. But I'm not an engineer and I'm not a mixer. So we always had an engineer and we always had a mixer that we would defer to. And we would just be the creative people overseeing the process and what gets recorded and how it gets recorded and the sequence and the layout and if we're going to put an acoustic guitar overdub here or the backing vocals, they should be panned that way. So, basically, for me, being a producer is a way of just having control over the final product.
How did Liquid Tension Experiment come to be?
You got just a little louder?
How did Liquid Tension Experiment come to be?
Liquid Tension Experiment was born out of that frustrating period that I was just talking about. We had done the Falling Into Infinity album, and we were forced to work with Desmond Child and forced to do all these things that were making me crazy. And the label, Magna Carta, came to me and they kind of said, hey, come over here, we'll let you do whatever you want. And put together a dream band to do whatever you want. And I was so frustrated with the machine that Dream Theater had become at that point that I was excited by the idea of doing a side project. And they basically said, who do you want to work with? And I said, well, actually originally it was Billy Sheehan and Jens Johansson. Those were the first two people that I was going to work with in Liquid Tension Experiment. And the schedules didn't work out and it went away for a while. And then the label came back to me and said, okay, Billy and Jens can't do it anymore. Who do you want to work with? And I said, I'd love to work with Tony Levin, and I'd love to work with Jordan Rudess. We wanted Jordan for Dream Theater originally back on the Awake tour, and he just was unavailable. So I wanted to work with Jordan. So Liquid Tension began with just me, Jordan, and Tony, and I couldn't decide on a guitar player. I was thinking about Dimebag, I was thinking about Tom Morello, I was thinking about Trevor Rabin, and I contacted all these guitar players, and they just didn't work out for one reason or another. And then my wife suggested, well, what about asking John Petrucci to do it? And there you go. That's how the whole thing was born, and John came on board, and we did 2 instrumental albums that were a great relief at the time from the frustration I was feeling creatively with Dream Theater. And after the second album, and you know, having that pep talk about gaining control back in Dream Theater, that's when we decided, let's bring Jordan into Dream Theater. And at that point, we took that writing chemistry and applied it to Dream Theater, and LTE kind of got put on the shelf at that point from then on. How are we doing on time? Anybody know what time it is? Because I know Richie's got a discovery room here.
5 after 4.
What is it?
5 after 4.
5 after 4. Okay, we got like 10 more minutes.
How do you develop your double bass technique, like how clean and even it all is? And
My double bass technique, or lack thereof, is basically, I started with double bass. You know, when I started with double bass, there wasn't any of this crazy Slayer, Pantera, you know, Thomas Lang, Virgil Donati drumming. When I started with double bass, it was basically like Ginger Baker was like, you know, the only double bass drummer, or you know, Carmine Appice, and it was basic, just. Then came Alex Van Halen and Tommy Lee, and they were like kind of and Tommy Aldridge, Tommy Lee, Alex Van Halen. Those were the first double bass drummers that I started to learn how to play double bass patterns from. And Neil Peart had played double bass, but he wasn't like doing many patterns. He was just more accents and things like that. You know, he wasn't doing a lot of patterns. So it was mainly Tommy Aldridge, Tommy Lee, Alex Van Halen, and they were doing, you know, basic double bass stuff. So I would learn off of those records, you know, the early Ozzy Osbourne records, the early Van Halen records, and Motley Crue, and basically I would learn with just playing along to those records or playing along to a click track, and the most important thing was getting my left foot developed, because I had already played single bass, so I knew how to play along with the record and go. So it was a matter of what do you do with your left foot? So I would start to bring it in. So I would play along with the records with a click track, and I would concentrate. If the click track's doing that, I would start by locking in the right foot with the kick drum, and then I would be conscious that my left foot is going to be doing all upbeats from that. My left foot's going to go. But always making sure that's still locked in there. And the thing for me was always to make sure I was leading with my right foot. Now there's a lot of people that do doubles and different paradiddles and rudiments with their feet. That's great, that's awesome, but I don't do that. I'm just a single stroke dude and mainly lead with my right. And so being that I'm leading with my right, it's always going to pretty much lock with this hand. Are you giving me the wave down because we got to wrap up? We got to wrap up. Oh, last question.
All right, with Dream Theater, why did you guys decide to make songs with weird time signatures or complex?
It wasn't working with odd time signatures wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't like we formed Dream Theater and said, okay, we're gonna write with 1,000,000 time signatures. I think it was mainly our interest in it. I would say mainly mine and John Petrucci's interest in it. I think John Mayung wasn't always very conscious of the time signatures, but it was always like me and John Petrucci. And then later on, once Jordan joined the band, he's very well versed in that. But I mean, it stemmed, for me, my interest in odd time signatures stemmed from the progressive music I was listening to. Mainly Rush. I mean, Rush was playing in 7/8 and 5/8. And then Genesis and Yes also used a lot of odd time signatures. So I would go out and buy the songbooks and just kind of like count along. I would listen to like La Villa Stringiato or Xanadu, and just count. Okay, that's what a 7 feels like. Oh, that's what a 5 feels like. That's what an 11 feels like. And I just became very interested in it. And the same with Genesis and Yes. And then it went to a whole new level when I discovered Frank Zappa, because Frank Zappa was doing 16th note subdivisions. He was doing stuff that was in 1916 and 2116 and weird polyrhythms and stuff. But I was just fascinated by it, you know, and so it was a big part of what I brought. Because I was fascinated with it, I brought it into Dream Theater. And there wasn't many people in the mid-'80s doing it. When we formed Dream Theater, you know, Rush was doing straight ahead pop stuff, Yes was doing pop stuff, Genesis was doing pop stuff. There was no prog at that point. You know, there was maybe Marillion, or maybe you had Queensryche, or Metallica, or Iron Maiden dabbling in prog ideas, but they were metal bands. So we were just trying to fill a void. Like, we loved Rush and the early Rush, so we wanted to do something that was like that. And we were just filling a void that we were missing ourselves. It's not like today, like you guys know, there's a million bands that sound like Dream Theater today, but when we formed, it wasn't like that. The prog scene was over and done and dead. And we kind of resurrected it just because we liked it, but we wanted to do a heavier version because we also liked Metallica and Maiden and Sabbath and Priest. So we kind of put them together like a giant musical Reese's Pieces cup that tastes great together. Anyway, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for you guys, we get to turn this room into Richie's Discovery Room for the rest of the afternoon. And this kid is staying up here, and we are closing Dog Camp tonight with the final Winery Dogs concert. And we're gonna play all the songs that we didn't play for you on Monday night's show, and maybe a few more things, and hopefully my kick drum pedal will remain intact. You'll get a fully kicked double-bassed concert, and a final night, and after we finish the gig, Billy's gonna DJ for us. We'll have a great after show party and get to hang out and say goodbye with you guys for the final night. But it has really been an amazing experience, and believe it or not, I think, you know, all of us Winery Dog guys and the counselors have enjoyed this and have learned just as much as you guys. I mean, we've really enjoyed watching and learning from you guys just as much, and that's what it's all about. It's about sharing the experience and learning from each other. That's why we're all here. And thank you so much for making the first Dog Camp a great success. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tonight at the Winery Dogs finale.